Is Google God? I want to talk today about something which is close to most of us and which inspires and sustains my ministry, without which my ministry would be inconceivable. Something that gets me through the day and pulls together the message, the good news that I try to share from this pulpit each week. Something that takes the dim power of my mind and magnifies it 1,000-fold so that I tread across the intellectual landscape in 10-league boots. It may sound like I'm talking about God, but I'm actually talking about Google. And thus the question we examine today, is Google God? Admittedly, the question in traditional terms is not only irreverent, but blasphemous. God has traditionally been conceived as that which is beyond all, not of this world, the source of all that is, and not a creature of human devising, but the being who has devised all of us. The very definition of idolatry is to take as ultimate something that is not ultimate, such as the worship of a golden calf, or of power, social position, or fame, or a giant search engine, which is one of the world's richest corporations. It would not be a question, for example, that you could publicly discuss in colonial Jamestown, Virginia, for example, where it was an offense punishable by death to even question the Trinity. Though my tongue may be partly in my cheek as I formulate this question, I have a serious purpose. I hope by the time I finish, we will have a better understanding of both God and Google. My aim here is not to promote idolatry, but to expose it. There are some of us here who have little use for the idea of God. And there are some of us for whom God is a central feature of our lives. Some of you may think it a great waste of time to talk about God at all, while others of you may be offended by playing with the idea of what God is. I honor both of these opinions, but it's my conviction that a church where we are afraid to talk about the big theological issues is an impoverished church. It bespeaks a religion which is a mile wide and an inch deep. I also have a conviction that a subject as huge as God is often best approached through metaphor and analogy, parable, and yes, even parody. William Sloane Coffin, a minister whom I admired much in my youth, used to have a stock answer for someone who told him he didn't believe in God. He would say, well, tell me what God you don't believe in, because there's a good chance that I don't believe in him either. When you open a few books, as I have done from time to time, you realize that there are many different conceptions about God. So many different conceptions that it's actually more work to say that you're an atheist than that you're a theist. With that framing of the issue, let me say that again. There's so many conceptions of God out there that it's actually more work to say that you're an atheist than that you're a theist. With that framing of the issue, let us turn to look at what Google is. If you were to go back and explain to your father and mother 40 years ago what was going to happen with computers, how would you tell the story? Computers, which in 1970 were large data processing machines which were restricted to universities, governments, and large businesses, got a lot faster, cheaper, and smaller, so they became more common than automobiles and were used in offices and then in homes. You really not going to believe this, Mom. You really not going to believe this, Dad. Some university types figured out a way to have the computers talk to one another so that they could share files. And the system linking these computers became known as the Internet. At first, it was used by academics and scientists. Now, in the book of Genesis, the Bible story explains the origins of different languages by saying that God decreed different languages to confuse the humans and to keep them from building a tower to the heavens and becoming like God. The story of computers replicates this. As each different computer system developed its own modes and its own language, they had difficulty talking to each other. But in the 1980s, a scientist at the European Nuclear Research Center, CERN, named Tim Berners-Lee, undid Babel by developing a hypertext language that all computers could speak, and he called the result the World Wide Web, which started up in 1990. I should add that Tim Berners-Lee is a Unitarian Universalist. And I see that as in the finest tradition of our religion, to get disparate voices to talk to one another. The Wide World Web allowed users to create websites, which would allow them to post files. Personal computers by this time had progressed beyond the old green or black screen with white type, remember that? Which was typical of computers when I first owned one in 1985. The graphical user interface, or GUI, allowed the user to display information in tables and graphs, and to put up photographs and videos, and to control the computer with a pointing device called a mouse. So you could share music, videos, photos on computers, and the World Wide Web took off. At first it was mostly written files that went up, but cameras and recording devices got cheaper and shrunk, and users found it easier and easier to post photos and recordings. The web just exploded with content, and so that within 10 years there was so much information posted on it that it was hard to find what you wanted. This is where Google came in. It wasn't the first search engine, but it was the best. From the early days, it was understood that one of the most useful things that computers could do is find a needle in a haystack of information, find it fast and cheaply. The accumulation of data in the World Wide Web was essentially one very large haystack. The World Wide Web was set up to get us the addresses of websites that we typed in, but it wouldn't tell us what was in the websites. It is like your fire department, which may have a detailed map of all the street addresses in the town, but that only tells them where the houses are, not what is in them. To find out what's in each house or website, you need something that goes into and searches the content of each website, and that is called a search engine. 90% of Google's revenues comes from its search engine advertising. This is set up to provide targeted ads. So when I search for a particular website, Google records what I'm interested in and puts ads on the sidebar to try to woo me with products according to my interests and tastes. As an advertising medium, it's particularly effective. You can't do this kind of targeted advertising with broadcast television, radio, newspaper, or billboards. It's only available through computers because only a computer can keep track of your shifting interests. Google started as a search engine in 1998 and soon proved itself superior to every search engine that had gone before. With its technical success came financial success, and Google was able to branch out and become an email provider. I signed up in 2007 and offer a host of other services. One of the most interesting projects that Google has done is to digitize books. It is set out to turn all the books ever printed into a computer-readable form and searchable form. So far, it has digitized 15 million books. However, it has lately run into a problem with copyright. It tried to make a huge cash settlement with a class of authors and publishers, but that settlement was recently rejected by a judge in New York. Meanwhile, Robert Darnton, the head of Harvard's library system, argued in a recent op-ed in the New York Times that the digitization project ought to be conducted under government or university auspices, not by a private corporation.